Hey, Anthony, do I have to address my audio over here? For some reason, the volume is really low. It may just be my laptop, but. Because I can hear you. Is it your volume on your end?
What about now? Is this any better?
A little bit.
Hey, Robin, do me a favor and talk, and let's see if the boardroom is
Yeah,
the volume is lower.
You're very, very soft. I'm not going to be able to hear what's going on there.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
You're just as soft, very, very soft volume, same as Anthony. I can barely hear you.
Then can you and I can talk, because I can hear Robin pretty good from the boardroom.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, yeah.
Okay, all right. I may have to go out for a second.
That's fine.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's my end. Sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Always good to test. Okay.
Do me a favor. Would you push those cords out of the way? Please. We'll throw it if I want to do it for you. I want to do it for you. Just put them like this. Boy, you just heard your own. How are you doing? I mean, is that new for this meeting?
Yeah. You can hear me. I'll go to school. Huh? Yes, you join the meeting class. I'm doing. You can talk.
I guess, provided for free, that's to be honest with you. Oh, Brett, hey, you want me here or going from? Here's fine. Get out of the office. This is my thing down. I like hiding. Oh, you like that? Well, I can't even see it behind the TV screen. I know that. I'm here. It's almost something. How are you? Good, how are you? Good. What's the kitchen? Where'd you go?
Went to, Tupelo Island, North Carolina.
On the hurricane?
Hurricane landed about 70 miles south of us.
So what'd you do? Open a bottle of wine and have some cheese?
You know, I would have. I wanted a t-shirt, that's what I lived through.
All right.
But my husband wanted to go inland, so we drove in and stayed the night at the hotel.
No one would know. Morning, Dave.
Hi, Jeff.
Good morning, Betty. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. You want to? Over or you don't?
Hey, Mark.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Steve.
Good morning.
We have 2 hearings today, and that's what I'm interested in, getting a transcript of those hearings.
Oh, okay, sounds good.
So you don't have to transcribe the rest of the hearing, but when those hearings are teed up, I would like you to, keep a record should we need it. Hi, Shanice. That's Mr. Frost. Morning, Anna Jo.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Good, good,
Good
thank you.
morning, Rob. Good morning, everybody. And Mario.
Okay, Rob, you're attending remotely. Okay, great.
Wait, Tony's supposed to call in?
Yes, and I think Mr. Neal was.
Yeah, okay.
Hello, David. We've got everybody here. We're just waiting for Tony. I'm sure he's on his way. There we go. Good morning, Tony. How you doing, John? Good.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Is this what we got? You're around in the IC6. This is the best we can do today. All right, thank you all for attending here in person and by teleconferencing. Starting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America,
to the republic which stands one nation under
one
God,
nation,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. I will note that all board members are present, Mr. Frost and Ms. Chappelle. We have teleconference, which is permitted under Ohio law, and Mr. Wondolowski and myself here in person. Also attending our Deputy Director Soder and our Director, Mr. Pilati. We have some staff here in the audience also. I will take a motion to approve the minutes for the July 13th, 2020 board meeting. Thank you. I will second that motion. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Go ahead.
I did have a minor edit at the end of the new business paragraph, the very last paragraph of the minute, public comment. Just to correct that, my comments were regarding the Ready for November task force, which I'm a member, president of the OADO, and that we are working with the Secretary of State's office on a campaign to encourage all voters and choose to vote by mail. And the final sentence about curbside voting, there was a clarification on the direction we had approved earlier in 2011 that curbside voting would be available to any voter who is physically unable to enter the voting location.
Thank you, Rob. So is there some specific language you want changed or?
I sent the changes just this morning to.
Okay, that's fine.
I can read those if you would like, so you have it for the record.
No, as long as you're working with Anthony, I'm fine with whatever edits you're suggesting. And I will, I guess, make a friendly amendment to Rob's comments and to include them. Great, thank you, Rob. Those edits will be included in the minutes. You can work with Anthony in that regard. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Great, that passes unanimously. I'm going to move to acknowledge the following Secretary of State directives: 2020-12, the 2020 Help America Act funds, security and accessibility grants that we'll be hearing more about today. 2020-13, in preparation for the statewide mailing of absentee ballot applications for the November 3rd, 2020 general election. 2020-14, data collection, registration, readiness, notice, and cancellation procedures for completion of 2016 supplemental and national change of address process. 2020-15, the examination and verification of petitions from independent candidates for president and vice president of the United States. And finally, 2020-16, the use of drop boxes and additional instruction for curbside voting. All very important directives, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about in the course of this meeting. There's a second to those acknowledgements. Second. Thank you, Mr. Wondolowski. Are there questions or comments for staff at this point about those directives? Okay, now here.
I actually have, I didn't know if staff had any, was staff, anybody gonna elaborate? I did have a question, and it sort of dovetails with Rob's clarification about his, with the friendly amendment, given the curbside voting directive that we got. And, I just wanna have staff just elaborate a little bit about, 2016, we are aware that we only have the one drop box, and we have now the ability for our Secretary of State or we have the obligation to accept absentee ballot apps there in that one box. And then also we have instructions for curbside voting, which thanks to the clarification that it was really appropriate. It's not for every voter. It's for those who are physically unable. How are we going to logistically, this is a question for Tony and Chantil, manage the traffic, the ingress, the egress, relative to our parking lot and the traffic on 30th and Euclid, given we're going to have a lot of activity in that area, and then to manage, how do we determine who is physically unable? I know we have instructions versus those voters who are going to just want to say, hey, I need to vote curbside because I want to get my ballot counted. Any thoughts that we're looking at around, potential congestion around that area? So any help you can give me on that, understand that. Thank you.
So I am sure you're correct. It currently gets busy around here towards the last days of going into the election with that drop box in the parking lot. And what we've done in the past is we've taken bipartisan teams and we've moved them out onto the sidewalk, sometimes into the turn lane on the other side of the street to try to help with some of that congestion, try to keep people actually coming into the parking lot, as well as placing a bipartisan team next to the existing ballot box just to help take it out of their hand and get it in the box quicker to get them through. We actually, though, have a meeting this Wednesday. We have a phone call that we've scheduled with the sheriff's office and with the 3rd District Police Department, which is we sit in the 3rd District. And what we want to talk to them about is to get some of their insights and tips that they have regarding large crowds. So how do we have a good flow for voters coming here to vote early in person, parking and different things we can do, signage with that, as well as suggestions on how do we deal with this congestion. Maybe what kind of street permits should we be looking at to potentially make the road one-way traffic at some points in time, or shut it down completely. So, we did for the first time, we met with the 3rd District Police when we were trying to figure out how to execute the election during St. Patrick's Day, and just their experiences with large crowds and trying to keep things flowing. So that we have that set up for this Wednesday. I believe it's in the morning, to just try to talk through some of these things and get some help with them, because we know it's going to be bad, highly congested. How do we allow people to be able to come in and vote early in person and then still get down here, because there is a big push for people request your ballot, which is good, but then go ahead and bring it down in person. Don't trust the post office. So we anticipate that there's going to be more coming. Hopefully most people do send it back in the mail, but we know we won't get all of them to do that. So that's a little bit on the Dropbox side of it, and just crowd control in general, get some pointers on that. As far as curbside voting is something that we've had for years. It's nothing new. Some people have taken advantage of it, but not a whole lot. But of course, it's getting a lot more publicity these days. And so the election official manual, it defines curbside voting as someone who can't come into the poll place, and it says that they're coming in a pair. So there's the person who drives the vehicle, and then there's the person who is unable to access the poll place. And so, you know, with the number of polling locations that we have to come up with a uniform way to do this. And so we're trying to stay close to what we've always done. The person that they show up, they park the car. The person who is able-bodied comes into the poll place. They actually wait in line. They vote regular, but when they get to the check-in, they inform the poll worker, we also have a curbside voter. So this way, it's not a cut-the-line program. The person who was able to vote inside has done that, and then they notify the check-in people that there's a curbside voter. So then a team would go out to the parking lot. We plan to deploy an additional electronic poll book for this November that will be just for curbside voting. Because the other thing we want to try to not do is stop the regular check-in process. So as we know, we have social distancing that's set up in the poll place. We want to make sure we're continuing to push people through the line. So we are not creating long lines outside the poll place. So I have a separate book, and the voting location manager will be tasked with, when they become aware of a curbside voter, to try to figure out who can they pull off to go outside. Maybe it's a person who's standing by the DS200 scanner, because we'll have a few people there, so they can go out with another person, look at the PAT table, again, trying to keep the standard check-ins in place, not disrupt. So we'll have this extra book to keep that going. But some of the things, as far as, you know, having a person stationed outside, it's really not realistic for us to have that at 300 polling locations. And they're trying to carve out special parking spots was difficult. Like we kind of looked a little bit at Maple Heights and right in front of the fire lane, so you can't have people parking in that fire lane and sitting there while they're waiting for someone to come out. So we plan to do what our normal process is, with the addition of a little bit more training to make people aware of it. And at this point, putting an additional electronic poll book that's labeled for curbside voting.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, and we can, once we figure out what the logistics are, maybe even something on the website, because I've been hearing people thinking that the curbside voting is for any voter, and, you know, and as a way to potentially address lines and so forth. So thank you for that, appreciate that.
Any other questions concerning these directives? Hearing none, we've got a motion to acknowledge them in a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Very good, thank you, that passes unanimously. If I get Joe, I'd ask you to, you had a wonderful suggestion about acknowledging Ms. Sheets, who I was unaware of all her commitment and efforts on behalf of this agency many years before I was down here. So I want to thank you for bringing that to this board's attention and ask you to tee this up and read it for the record. I understand Ms. Sheets is not available to attend today, because she has a prior commitment to Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. I do think it's really appropriate for us to adopt a resolution for Jane B. Sheets today. Some of you may know that Secretary of State LaRose actually visited Jane Sheets, personally traveled to her home back in March to acknowledge her as part of International Women's Day or Women's History, and there's a really nice Facebook video of the interview with Secretary of State LaRose and Jane B. Sheets. And I'm not on Facebook, but I did see it, and it's really kind of neat. He commended her work, and I just thought it would be fitting if we did acknowledge all of her trailblazing efforts for time at the Board of Elections and so forth. So with that, I'll just read a resolution, and I thank all my colleagues for being willing to give a resolution for Jane B. Sheets. Jane B. Sheets for her commitment to democracy and service to the voters of Cuyahoga County.
Froze up there, right? Joe, can you hear us?
Okay.
You froze up there, right, Joe?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you, am I back on?
You are.
Okay. Okay, I don't know where I froze at, but I'll just continue. Whereas she began her civic involvement with the Cleveland Democratic Party in 1965, and because of her unbridled passion and boundless energy, Ms. Sheets continues to be called upon to engage in numerous civic and community projects. And whereas in 1975, Ms. Sheets was appointed as a Democratic board member of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, where she served as chair from 1976 to 1979, and whereas Ms. Sheets works tirelessly with her board colleagues to administer fair and transparent elections in service to all the voters of Cuyahoga County, which tradition of bipartisan collegiality continues to this day, and whereas Ms. Sheets served as the first African-American female to chair a board of elections in the United States, and this historical fact is recorded in the congressional record dated November 16, 2012, whereas Ms. Sheets is a trailblazer and has earned our respect and gratitude because of her years of service to our community and specifically the voters in Cuyahoga County. Now it is therefore resolved that we, chairman and members of the Board of Elections, join together with staff in presenting Jane B. Sheets with this resolution to formally acknowledge her leadership and service to the voters of Cuyahoga County. And respectfully submitted.
Thank you. And I'll take that as a motion to adopt from you, Ina Jo, and I'll second that. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution for Ms. Jane B. Sheets, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And Rob, did I hear you or you thumbs up?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank board member 2003.
Thank you, and I'm going to defer to Linda and Anthony about signatures. Dave and I can sign if there's an original here today, and then maybe somehow circulate this to get your original signatures. Thank you. We will tee up the determination of the validity of provisional ballots and authorization to count provisional ballots from the August 4th, 2020 special election. Is that words?
Good morning. This will be the briefest report that I have to give as far as provision of voting is concerned. Before you have a copy of the provisional validation summary report. A total of 3 provisional ballots were issued at the polling locations during the August 4th, 2020 special election in Maple Heights, Illinois. There were no provisionals cast in early in-person voting. Staff verified the provisionals in accordance with Chapter 6 of the Secretary of State's Election Official Manual, Provisional Voting, and in accordance with Directives 2019-04, 2020-08, and 2020-09. The 3 provisionals met the requirements for opening. There were no incoming out-of-county provisionals or provisionals with voters who previously registered in Cuyahoga County. Registration Department is recommending that the 3 provisional ballots from the August 4th, 2020 special election in Maple Heights, Ohio, be approved for opening.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. I will move, based on your report, to acknowledge or to authorize the count of those provisional ballots as set forth in the record today, the August 4th, 2020 special election. If there's a second. Second. Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Edwards? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Ina Jo?
Aye.
Thank you. I just want to make sure the record's clear. It passes unanimously. We'll move on to the next item of business, which is I move to acknowledge the disposal of 135 ES&S AutoMark ballot marking devices. There's a second? Second. Thank you. Tony, I do have a question, or Chantel, can you just kind of, why are we unloading these and what's the reason for that?
Sure, so we, I'm not seeing here in our packet, but Tony Caliber did prepare a summary regarding this, so, and we'll get that to you. But what we did was, when we, in 2008, purchased ES&S equipment, at that point in time, we had substantially more polling locations, over 500 polling locations. And the AutoMark is the ballot marking device that for accessible voters would use. You have to put at least one for both places, and then you have at least one typically a few more here at our really in-person voting site. We also have auto marks that we purchased that we would send out for training, so poll workers would know how to use this equipment prior to election day. And of course, you always have a few extra that you have out ready to go in case something breaks before election day. Well, over the years, as we have re-precincted and have come down probably at least over 400 precincts in the last years, you reduce the number of poll places you have. Now what happens is you have a surplus of equipment that you no longer have. And what we've done is we have 635 of these machines. We only keep 500 of them on our maintenance agreement and up to date and ready for deployment. Now, we need 300 to execute our election, so that still gives us a couple hundred extra so we have that enough again for training and for backups. So these 135 have just been sitting in the Halley warehouse, have not been maintained by ES&S, are not part of the ES&S maintenance contract, meaning we don't pay for the maintenance on these because they're not needed. So there is a process to dispose of equipment. We've notified the Secretary of State's office. They have signed up on a form to do this, and then we've also made county council aware of it through the process. So what we want to do is these 135 machines are just taking up space. They would never be deployed in an election. They're not maintained. The only thing we carry is we do carry them on our insurance policy, because if anything were to happen, we want to make sure they're covered. But if these are approved or acknowledged for disposal today, then those also would come off of the insurance policy, because there's no need to do that. The equipment has no resale value. This is, ES&S doesn't manufacture this anymore. This is whole technology. No one buys this stuff. You can't really even give it away. That's so
the benefit, in addition to keeping up our insurance policy, is we're going to free up some space for other matters that you can store.
So, right, what I would hope is some of the stuff that we send out to Berman's to store there, like identification envelopes, might actually be able to keep some of that here in-house, because those are items that typically public records requests come. So now we can have our fingerprints versus having to drive out to Bedford to where they're stored in storage. So you have those benefits also.
Any other questions for Mr. Pilati or Ms. Silver? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to go on to certification.
I just have one question, one request, if you would. Could we just ask the other people who are participants, there's quite a few, to mute their microphones if they're not speaking until they speak, because I think that creates a little bit of interference and pop-ups for any slight movement or motion or noise. It just would be helpful if everybody could mute unless they're talking, other than, obviously, I think Anthony Alto, who's managing the call. Thank you.
Thank you. We're not getting any feedback here at headquarters, but I understand you might be, and so if everybody could mute their microphones if they're not speaking, that'd be great. Anything you could do, Anthony, to coordinate that. We're on to the certification of the remaining candidates for the November 3rd presidential general election, and we have Mr. Lawler here to tee that up for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 3 items we'd like the board to review for us before we certify the candidates with issues for November. The first one is a local liquor option for 7 Hills Ward 4B, minor store 221. The petitioner was required to have 200 valid signatures after review by ourselves, and the restriction from it came over 239 valid, and 201 short. Attorney Don Conn has been hired as an agent. I believe he's on the phone call today. There are 6 signatures or entries that he would like the board to review, and which here is 1 signature that is needed to certify to the ballot. How do you want to proceed?
So, yes, thank you. And we do have to, I'm going to kind of organize this. We have the certain, as it relates to the candidates, Mr. Lawler, we have another issue there.
Yes, we have 1, we have 2. One is the name. And, now that petition is valid, so he's already on the list, he's certified. The other one is the other state school board, he is insufficient, right, 35 signatures, and we asked to have him actually.
Right.
He is not have.
So I'm gonna go, from what I'm understanding, we need to, the board needs to address these two issues. And depending on how we address them, then we can proceed to certification. Right. Right. And those issues are one of Mr. Richard Neal would be preferred, and you've given us a summary of what has happened here, that we add a line on our petitions, how they want their name to appear. It's not part of the SOS form, and in this case, Mr. Neal's indicated he wants to go as Richard, quotation marks, Rocky Neal, correct?
Correct.
Right. And Mr. Neal, are you on the phone with us today? Hello, can we hear, Mr. Neal, are you available? Anthony, do you know if he was on? I know he was planning to attend.
He said he was planning to attend, but I don't know if he's on the call.
Okay, well, we can,
Mr. Neal, if you're on the call, press *6 to unmute yourself.
I talked to his attorney this morning, Chris was not going to be on the call.
okay, so I tell you what, I do have Mr. Neal. Do you have a phone number for Mr. Neal, Anthony?
If that was Brent, you have it
Yeah,
right there, do you?
Well, what I'd like to do is we'll tee up the other one then, while you try to get Mr. Neal on.
216-570-3893.
Did you get that, Anthony?
One more time, Brent, please.
216-570-3893.
Did you get that?
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll.
Yeah, got it, thanks.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the other issue then, while you can at least try to text Mr. Neal or call him to see if he wants to attend the hearing. Having moved past that, then we'll go on to the other issue that you discussed concerning the local option out there at the Myers in Seven Hills. We have received, Mr. Musson, are you on the call too?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Okay, great. Mr. Musson is our legal counsel for the Board of Elections, and he has provided us with a memorandum concerning the matter of signatures concerning the local option, as well as one concerning Mr. Neal's request. And we've had the benefit, the board members, of reading his opinion. We also have Mr. McTeague's letter. We have a summary from our staff. And as I understand it, we, as a board, if we find that one of these signatures is valid, then that would give the petitioners enough signatures to move on and get this on the ballot. And from my position, I guess I want to address, because if we find one signature is valid, we don't have to move on to the other signatures that are an issue here too, I understand. Right. And I think, having said that, you know, there's one issue concerning a change of name, a woman who was registered under one name and subsequently got married and signed. Our legal counsel was opined on that, as well as staff has. So I guess I want to start with Mr. McTeague. If you're here, Mr. McTeague, are you on the line?
Actually, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Corey Colombo. I'm Don McTighe's law partner, so I was hoping to address the board this morning.
Okay, Mr. Colombo, that's fine. As petitioners here, we're going to let you speak first in this issue. And I'd ask you just to have your remarks focused on the signatures of Miss Rachel Kopek. This is the individual who was registered under a different name, subsequently got married. I know you've set forth an argument view with Mr. McTeague. Could you summarize that for this board, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump right into that issue. And before I forget, though, there are essentially 6 or 7 signatures in total that we have affidavits regarding. But I'd be happy to start on the married name issue. And I also would be remiss if I don't just quickly thank working with the Cuyahoga board is just always they make it so easy on attorneys and people that come before you, between Brent and Mark, your legal attorney, to your board clerk. They're just so responsive and helpful so I wanted to mention that.
Thank
So, with the situation with two, women, who signed the petition, Rachel Kopak is her married name, and Jennifer Lucas is her married name. Unfortunately, we were not able to reach Jennifer in time before the hearing. She was not home when we went by her residence. But Rachel Kopak did sign an affidavit for your consideration, which hopefully the original arrived on Friday based on our records. In her situation, she signed her name as her new married name. However, her voter registration is still listed under her maiden name, which is, I believe, spelled Agay. If I can read my notes here. Rachel Kopak has since changed her registration to have her new name, so it's updated for your records. But we believe this signature, and frankly Jennifer Lucas's as well, should be counted for a couple reasons. Based on the Zach Scott case and all the cases that come before it, if a board staff initially rejects the signature, but then later can conclusively confirm by sworn affidavit that the person is in fact the voter. So the law is under Zach Scott and cases that came after that if you're not, boards are, instead of assuring the validity of the signature, what you're really doing is making sure you have the correct voter. And I'm paraphrasing that. Well, now with Mrs. Kopak's affidavit, you're sure you do have the correct voter. The other point I would mention here is there's been quite a shift in thinking in recent years from the cases years ago about married women who use both their married and maiden names in personal and professional uses. And for that, we cited a typo letter from June of 2019 in the Judge Mingo case, where the Secretary of State said that, women should not be penalized for choosing to use different variations of their names for different purposes when it comes to voting. And that's paraphrasing. That's not taken straight from the typo. But for those reasons that I stated, we believe both these women should not be penalized for using variations of their married and maiden names. These are both the correct voters.
Thank you, Mr. Colombo. Yes, Mr.
In
Wanlowski.
light of that explanation, there was only one signature short. I would move to validate that.
For Ms. Kopak's name, you would include her name, therefore giving, okay. And I will second that. Mr. Musson, I just have a few questions for you. The standard for this board is clear and convincing evidence that the petitioner needs to present, correct?
Correct, you're up, Mr. Chairman.
And also, are we in receipt of those affidavits, Mr.? Okay, so we're in receipt of the original affidavit. And as you pointed out, and when I, very thoughtful memorandum concerning this matter, Mr. Musson, that the board should consider the affidavit of Ms. Kopak. If it supports, she's affirming that in fact is her signature on there, and that's sufficient, clear and convincing evidence for me to support Mr. Wendlowski's motion. I don't think I'm missing something here. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Musson?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think the board has the discretion to accept that and weigh that affidavit against the standard. And if the board is satisfied that the affidavit and the other evidence presented satisfies the clear and convincing standard, that the board may authenticate that signature and count hers towards the sufficiency of the petitions.
Thank you, Mr. Musson.
Thank you. I just want to join it and just to say, given the affidavit that we saw attesting to the authenticity rather of her signature and the fact that she has identified herself to be the elector that needed to satisfy the legal requirements, I would be in favor of, I would support the motion as well.
Thank you. Mr. Frost, any comment? Question?
Sure, I'll do. No, I do support the motion. The evidence is very convincing. Certified.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Hearing no other further questions or comments, we have a motion on the floor to count her signature towards the local option petition. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I see Mr. Frost. That motion passes unanimously. Mr. Colombo, in light of that fact, I'm going to suggest we don't move on to the other signatures. There's no need to. This petition will be certified for the November election. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We are now on the issues of the you have a separate motion?
Sure, okay. So there are no, you've recommended and you put in our agenda, Mr. Lawler, the certification of issues, the remaining issues for the November 3rd, 2020 ballot. And I will have one motion and ask for a second for those to certify those issues that are set forth in our agenda. Please, a second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Aye. Okay. And Mr. Frost is an aye also. Those pass unanimously. Now I will make a second motion to certify the local option for the Meyer store at Seven Hills to the November general election ballot if there's a second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Lawler, and thank you, Mr. Colombo, on behalf of your client, and Mr. Lawler on behalf of his party. Anthony, we're going to move on. Thank you. Anthony, have you been able to reach Mr. Neal or?
Mr. Neal's on the call now.
Okay, great. And Steve, well, we have a court reporter here who's remote, so he's transcribing at least these matters. Should we need a transcript? Having said that, why don't you tee up the issue with Mr. Neal, Mr. Lawler, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Neal, running for state school board district 11, his petition is valid in all matters to be certified. The question comes down to whether he has a name during the Rocky Neal. He was on the ballot in 2007, 2011, 2015, and 2019 as either Richard Neal or Richard J. Neal. And the now manager myself, it is on our side of the field that he has precedence to be on ballots is Richard Neal. We don't, we also do not believe any candidate can go on with a quote nickname. So the board chooses to put him on the ballot, at least he wants Richard Neal or Rocky Neal, and now it's Richard Rocky.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. And I'll also point out, you put a package together for us being the board members with your recommendation. And in fact, you, the staff, has cited to the Ohio Elections Manual as well as a directive from the Secretary of State, correct? Right. That's 2019-27. Mr. Musson, you have opined too and given this board another thoughtful memorandum concerning this matter. We also have materials, I believe, provided by Mr. Neal, correct? Where he shows some documents showing his name is Rocky. Okay, well, okay, we have that in our package. Mr. Musson, could you please kind of summarize your advice to the board here on this matter, how we should approach it? Then I'm going to hear from you, Mr. Neal.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the preferred caption of Mr. Rocky's name on the ballot is not permissible under the Secretary of State's manual. However, the Secretary of State does allow candidates to use a derivative of their legal name on the ballot. And then in addition to that, the courts have determined that candidates can use a nickname that's not their legal name, provided that's the name that they're generally known in the community and that they have been understood under that name for a number of years. So there's a little bit of factual discovery that needs to occur prior to the use of a non-legal name or the adoption of a nickname for the ballot. But the parenthetical or in current quotation marks is not permitted within the full legal name.
And you base that opinion, your opinion, Mr. Musson, on the directive issued by the Secretary of State?
Correct.
Okay.
So If the board determines that Rocky is a derivative of Richard, he may appear as Rocky Neal. Or alternatively, if the board determines that, Mr. Neal has adopted the name Rocky, and that is how he's generally known in the community for a number of years, and that the use of the name Rocky is not simply to avoid, past electoral defeats or association with failed campaigns, or to generate some sort of, electoral advantage through the use of, that name. And it's really just to identify himself as he's known in the community and not to manipulate or mislead or create some sort of fraud on the voters. The board has the discretion to allow him to use his nickname rather than Richard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Musson. I'm gonna hear from Mr. Neal, and then I'm gonna open it to the board members, because we're gonna have questions for you as well as Mr. Neal. Mr. Neal, you on the phone?
I am.
Okay, Mr. Neal, I'm gonna swear you in because you're gonna answer questions under oath. And you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you shall answer any answer.
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Mr. Neal, why don't you share with the board your position on this matter? And you heard from our legal counsel, you've heard from our staff. We'll hear from you now, and I know the board members will have some questions for you and Mr. Musson. Proceed, sir.
Sure. I will go back to kindergarten. My first issue is, my mother made me aware of this. I don't know if you get reverberation, so I apologize for that. My mother first walked me down to kindergarten back when I was 5 or 6 years old. She walked me down to the school, dropped me off. I was a shy kid, hiding behind her leg, and dropped me off, and went about 3/4 way home from, when schools were neighborhoods, and she walked home and she goes, you know what? I gotta go back there. He's not gonna know his name. I've never been called Richard before. So she went all the way back to the school, told the principal, or told the teacher, said, you know, he's never been called Richard before. He's always been called Rocky, so he probably won't answer. And I did never answer. She goes, I wonder why he never answered, because he was never called Richard. So that was the name that I was given from when I was very young. That's who I am. That's my social person. That's how I operate my life. All my Richard that I sign stuff with is just all the legal stuff. I've been known by Rocky my whole life. That's all I can really tell you. That's who I am.
So, Mr. Neal, you have provided, I believe, the board with some documents in support of your position. Okay, and just to let you know, we've got something from New York Life with a Richard Rocky Neal on a return envelope, a certificate of recognition for your officiating with your name Rocky Neal, as well as a certificate of appreciation from the Brooklyn Schools as Rocky Neal, as well as a program with your name in it, and then business cards from the school district with the name Rocky Neal, as well as a program where you're set forth as softball Hall of Fame, all with the name Rocky Neal. There are two questions. I'm going to start off, and then the other board members will. There's, from my perspective, two issues, Mr. Neal. One is we're told that you can't, the law doesn't permit you to run as Richard, quotation marks, Rocky Neal. That's considered a nickname. But board does have discretion if you so choose. If you wanted to run as Rocky Neal, we could consider that, permitting that. So, how do you approach this? Is it got to be Richard and Rocky Neal for you, or could an alternative solution possibly? Do you want the board to consider Rocky Neal alone?
I would prefer Rocky, to be quite honest. Richard is, if you call my cell phone and someone asks for Richard, that means they're trying to sell me something because they don't know me. So preferably, I would go under Rocky Neal.
Okay, well, those are my questions. I know the board members have some questions too. And let me just make a disclosure. I've known Mr. Neal for 40 years, and I've known him as Rocky Neal. He went to college with me. I think you were a couple years behind me, Rocky. He was a tight end, and I was a defensive back, and he was very good at his game. But I must say, just to share this in complete transparency, I've always known him as Rocky Neal. So, having said that, I want to hear from the other board members, questions you have from him or Mr. Musson, or your thoughts about this matter.
Mr. Chairman, that was my question.
Mr. Frost, Ms. Chappelle?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions for you, Rocky. Whether or not, so you've run previously for office and you didn't, I don't think, change your name then. Is there any reason you decided to try to do that now?
The reason why is if I'm not mistaken, I talked to Brett about it twice. I asked him, and I'm not really a pushy guy as far as, hey, I want to do that. He said, here's the rule, and I said, okay. And I was okay with it for the time being. I'm in Brooklyn. No, if you check, I think of the 4 elections I was in, I believe it is, we had no competition in 3 of those to the last one. So that's the only one. I still went with Richard Neal because that's what Frank told me, you know.
So now you're switching because, well, I mean, I guess one of the standards that we have to look at is whether or not you gain some, or you're positioning to gain any kind of unfair advantage in, changing your name. I'm just wondering what the reason is, now that you decided you really want to use Rocky.
Well, because that's what I'm known as. That's who I am. That's how I've grown up. I'll be honest with you. Official papers are signed Richard J. Neal, and that's it. After that, nobody calls me Richard.
That's the only question. I actually would be in favor of supporting a motion to permit the use of that name, just by way of commentary. I mean, the evidence, it seems like you very clearly, in the documents that you submitted, your Board of Education materials, the commencement program, the OSA information, and just from 2019 and 2020 documents that you submitted with Rocky Neal on there. So, I've got no problem with that in this instance. So, those just would be my comment and my question and my comments on that. Thank you.
I just, as everybody knows, I have a securities license. In every state that I apply for, I always have to put it also known as, or a DBA as Rocky. So I have 5 different licenses.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Do you have any question or comment?
I don't. My main question are.
Mr. Chairman, in light of the discussion, I would move to allow Mr. Neal to use Rocky Neal on the ballot.
Okay, I will second that motion. Mr. Neal, that is a motion to be made to permit you to run as Rocky Neal, not Richard Rocky Neal. And I second that. And any other question or comment from the board members? If hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Mr.
I
Frost?
thank you all.
Okay, that's how it'll appear, Mr. Neal. Thank you for your time. Mr. Frost, I guess I didn't hear you. Did you approve that motion? Thank you. Thank you. We don't always get the feedback teleconference. I just want to make sure that the record's clear. So that was unanimously done. Thank you. Then I will move on to certify the remaining candidates, having resolved the issue of Mr. Neal's name. Yes. Oh, that's the one that's not sufficient? Okay. And what name is that? Okay, thank you. So Jenny Hill doesn't have sufficient signatures, is that it? 35. You've advised him of. He hasn't withdrawn his petition. Mr. Hill, are you on this phone call by chance? Okay, Mr. Hill? Hit *6 to unmute if you're on. Hearing none, that he isn't on, I will I'll move to take staff's recommendation and not validate the petitions of Mr. Hill as much as he's 35 signatures. Thank you, Mr. Wondolowski. Are there questions or comments? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Very good, passes unanimously. Now I can move to certify the remaining candidates for the November 3rd, 2020 presidential general election, as much as we took care of the Mr. Hill's petitions as well as Mr. Neal's. If there's a second. Thank you, Mr. Wondolowski. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Waller. We're going to move on to the acknowledgements of withdrawal of candidates for the November 3rd, 2020 presidential general election. I'll move to acknowledge those withdrawals and look at you. So, is that just Judge Calabrese? Yeah. Withdrawing, okay, and also the withdrawal of the City of Maple Lakes proposed senior center renewal tax, that's been withdrawn because it passed for this audience. There's a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Wojciechowski. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 And, Mr. Frost, Mr. Chappelle?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, just for the record clear. And then, we're gonna also acknowledge the replacement of, also there's a withdrawal of, resignation from offices. I will move to acknowledge the resignation from offices of Mary Beckenbach, Dan Langshaw, and Jeffrey McCarthy, as well as the appointments to elected office of Thomas McDonald and Jeffrey McCarthy. If there's a second. Thank you, Mr. Wojciechowski. Any question or comments on these? I'm going to circle back to the judicial races in a second. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, and Mr. Wojciechowski's on record too is supporting it. We also have the withdrawal of Mr. Mayor from the Domestic Relations Court, and I will acknowledge that withdrawal also if there's a second. And any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Actually, we had acknowledged that for all prior meetings.
Oh, we have, thank you, Mr. Frost, that Mr. Waller said yes. So now I will move to acknowledge the replacement, the appointment, the replacement candidates for the November ballot. Oh, Mr. We don't have to do specifically with Mr. Callahan and Mr. Cochran. Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on. Thank you, Brett. All right, on to the approval of vouchers. I will move to approve the vouchers. Is it set forth in our agenda?
There are two items on the voucher list.
Okay. I don't know that we got it in our package, but Ms. Kendra Susi's here. Did you see this, David? Is it? Yes. Okay. I'm assuming.
I thought there was only one. I saw the ES&S. Was there a second one?
Postage estimate.
Oh, thank you.
And Mr. Frost, have you seen these vouchers?
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, you broke up, Rob. Have you seen the vouchers?
Yes.
Okay, great. Ms. Susi, why don't you summarize what we got in front of you?
Sure, the first item is, for the annual voting equipment maintenance and license fee for the period of 10/1/20, 9/30/21. This contract was a 5-year original contract in 2008 to 2013 for the purchase of the equipment, and then the contract automatically renews for unlimited number of 1-year periods. And unless the notice to not renew is delivered 90 days prior to the end of the current renewal period. So this is just for the annual maintenance.
Is there a contract associated with this, Kendra?
Yes.
Yes. And Mr. Musset, have you had a chance to review that contract?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. David Chappelle had a couple of questions that we're working through. I'm sorry, we're talking about the refurbished machines. I just want to make sure I follow the right agenda.
No, we're talking about the maintenance contract for ES&S.
Yes, correct, yes. This is the renewal?
Yes.
Yes. The renewal is effectuated through the payment, and the board needs to authorize the payment, which will exercise the board's option to renew.
Thank you. And the second item is for postage. It's self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yes. But it does include, estimate is approximately $200,000 more than the original budget due to the increase that we expect for the additional full by mail applications and full by mail.
Could you use CARES money for some of that postage, Tony, or Chantel?
We're actually utilizing part of the $571,000 we got back from the primary spending election.
Right.
So we're not asking for additional appropriations.
Okay, well, I'll move to approve the voucher items if there's a second, and I'll open up to further questions. Second. Thank Thank you. Any other questions to Ms. Susi? And Joe, Rob, no questions? Okay. Hearing none, all those.
No.
Great. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
I,
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you for your time. The next item is, the director, deputy director are asking the board to approve the purchase of 2 DS 850 central count ballot scanners. I've had a chance to talk to the director and deputy about this, but why don't you kind of give us a summary of why we're doing this and how this came about?
Sure. So, these DS 850s, we currently have 5, Board of Election, Cuyahoga County owns 5 of these. And these are the machines that, scan the vote by mail ballots for our county. It is certified equipment, and it is what these 850s, they complement and work with DS 200s as far as they can read ballots that are scanned through that equipment. And so we have, in the years since we purchased ours, the 5 in 2014, have been able to come up with some time studies as to how much throughput we can put. And with the increased anticipated vote by mail turnout for this upcoming presidential election, with what we have, it's extremely challenging to process those ballots. You can get into a situation where you are working very extended hours. And not that we're afraid of that, but it almost becomes it's a point where it can be unmanageable. And so one of the things that Secretary of State has encouraged boards of elections to do is if you can get additional central count equipment, go ahead and try to do that. So we reached out to ES&S a little while back, asking if we could rent some equipment. And ES&S doesn't have any equipment to rent. They're actually having a hard time keeping up with production of new equipment for other counties. And so we weren't sure what we would do in this situation. And we thought, okay, well, maybe we need to hire an ES&S representative technician to sit here for 10 days towards the end of the cycle in case a piece of equipment goes down. And they do from time to time to make sure we get it up and running right away, because you can't have downtime with that volume. Well, we came across another one of our vendors, 10X, does have work and contracts with Canyon County, Idaho, who they have switched over from ES&S to a different equipment vendor. And so they have 2 of these 850 scanners. And because they switched vendors, ES&S was not interested at that point in time in buying them back from them. So when 10X made us aware of this, we immediately reached out to the Secretary of State's office, Canyon County, Idaho, and the ES&S to see what would be the likelihood that we could potentially get this equipment at a reasonable price and bring it here to Cuyahoga to handle this extended volume. And maybe even not have to have a technician on the site for the 10 days because we have more equipment. So it's been a back and forth with all the parties, and ultimately ES&S said they would be willing to negotiate with Canyon County, purchase the equipment from them, and then sell it to us. They would, it's almost like a pre-owned certified car type dealership. They go, they pick up the equipment, they bring it back to Idaho, to Omaha, where they're housed. They go over it. They do a maintenance of the machine, make sure everything is in good working condition. And then once that is, they would then go ahead and ship it here to Cuyahoga County, install it. They would put it under basically a bumper to bumper 1-year warranty on the equipment, and would include installation and licensing for this equipment. And so, which was good, because one of the only ways really that we could potentially make this happen was working just with ES&S as opposed to getting Idaho involved and ES&S on the side and those types of items. So with that, we were able to, the 2 scanners for just under $100,000 would be the equipment, the 1-year warranty, the shipping, installation, licensing, that would all happen for 1 year.
Quick question, what does a new unit cost generally?
So if you were to go out and buy this now, like on state term contract, I think they're listed at $140,000, $150,000 at today's rate for these. And
You agree, Shannon?
Yes.
And what are we getting?
We would, so basically we would get one for 49,500.
Okay, so we get the price, and how many ballots have these machines counted versus our machines?
So, so the 5 that we have, obviously we're high volume, highest in the state. We probably have 1 million sheets of paper through ours, because you don't necessarily count ballots, you're counting ballot sheets. So we have over 1 million sheets throughput on each of our 5. These machines here are right in the vicinity of 100,000 sheets. So about 1/10 of what our equipment has. You can't say brand new, but pretty darn close.
Ms. Susie, you have a comment?
I just wanted to document it. 2-page, 14-inch.
Great, thank you. So, thank you for teaming it up. I know the board members, kind of summarizing why you're recommending the board approve this. I would move to purchase these 2 pieces of 2 DS 850 central count ballot scanners. If there's a second, and there may be other questions from the board. Second. Thank you, Mr. Warehouse. Are there questions for the director, deputy director?
I actually had asked Mark before the meeting, just last night when I was looking this over, just to clarify. I understand the need for it in the huge volume that we're going to have with ballot pages to process. I understand the need for the 2 additional scanners, and I'm not questioning that at all. Definitely would support the motion. But my question was around the fact that this is a refurbished piece of equipment, and whether or not the warranties that they're asking for, the limitation of liability, and the contract also has voting system review obligations where if there's a change in certification or any other changes, we're going to be obligated to share the cost of implementing those changes. And I was just wondering when I was reading it last night, whether or not, whether we agreed to those same provisions in our original contract with them when we purchased the new equipment. And if we didn't agree to those items, I would be on brand new equipment. Frankly, I would be concerned about agreeing to that on refurbished equipment. So I really just had a question for Mark, and I apologize, Mark, it was last minute. Last night, I didn't know if you had a chance to take a look. I understand the need, so that's not my issue, but my issue is the contract language and whether or not we are, going to undertake the same sort of obligations for refurbished equipment. Thanks. You could just let me know what you might know on that.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with the 2013 agreement, so I've just done a cursory comparison of the 2. And on those 2 provisions, the warranty, it looks like the original warranty was 5 years for the 2013 machines, whereas 1 year for these refurbished machines. But they will go on to a maintenance agreement that we would be paying for anyway. So I'm not sure the discounted price for the refurbished equipment reflects the limited warranty where we paid triple or a factor for that longer warranty and the more expensive equipment. And I can let Tony or Kendra kind of speak to the trade-off of longer warranty, higher price versus discounted refurbished machine with a lower warranty with maintenance that follows on. Limitation of liability, it looks like there was 2 times the fee paid for their limit on their liability. And the limits are the same other than the dollar amount. Punitive, consequential damages are waived in both agreements, but it's a 2x in the original purchase and it's a 1x here with the refurbished equipment. So it would be the aggregate of the fees that we pay to ES&S would be the cap of their liability as proposed in this agreement. So it's a little bit different there. Maybe we can negotiate something that look at the entire amount we paid ES&S. So I think there's some further negotiation that might want to take place there, at least, and not to talk, kind of proprietary or trade secrets here on the open line. Maybe it's something we can talk about. The other is the certification of the maintenance. If the feds or the state come up with a new requirement that require updates to these machines, you're correct. There is a pro rata in this current agreement. They're asking for us to pay a pro rata share of our costs or their costs based on our population. machine's a little, I'm not sure how our cost should be higher to get more voters. There might be an argument there that, we're using these machines more heavily. But that is something maybe we want to go back to them with, whereas before, ES&S took on that obligation that they take through. So there are some distinctions there that are disadvantageous to us. We might want to push back on them. I'm just concerned we're moving, on a very accelerated timeline to try to get these machines in by, September, and I think Tony can speak to the timelines we're working with. And then we also need to get council approval, to obtain these services. So I'm not sure the way to proceed, based on the need and the risk that you've identified that we are taking on beyond what we initially took on. Purchasing these devices, maybe we can work out, some mutually agreeable terms and conditions, as the process moves forward through council. And I'm not sure what you're comfortable with, but I'm here to help and do anything. And also, I don't want to give you bad information. This is just a cursory examination of the two. So I hope I'm not misstating my comparison, but I'm identifying discrepancies that you are raising.
Mr. Frost, any questions?
I was on mute, I did not.
What I'm hearing Mark, you saying is this product's gonna be on a maintenance agreement. So as far as maintenance goes, it'll be covered because we're already paying for that, correct? The concern is if somehow we need to recertify this equipment because of some new technology, we're gonna have to pay half of that cost, which we currently don't have to do on the 5 existing machines those fully.
Yeah, no, I follow you, and I'm not actually in the current maintenance agreement. I don't know what that particular clause is. If we are,
Well, the other issue to me is I just wanted to make folks aware, that there's some risk associated with this is a different arrangement for refurbished equipment. The limited liability issue is the one that's probably the most concern to me because this is refurbished equipment. We are really reliant on this equipment. There's really, from my perspective, no remedy that's adequate in an election when if the equipment doesn't work. And we've had a good experience with the ES&S, and I'm not trying to disparage them in any way. I just wanted to make my colleagues aware of my concerns around potential issues that might arise. And if there's an opportunity to, get them to adhere to, the standard and some of the provision that we had in the prior agreement, that would be my preference. But I know there's a time crunch, and I wouldn't withhold my vote in support of this because of it. But I do want to make us aware that I think there is potentially an issue. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chappelle. Any other comment or questions?
So this equipment, because it's voting equipment, county council does need to purchase this. And so we have been working with county council and with the county executive's office on procedures that they will be able to do to implement emergency measures to go ahead and sign off on that. So things are in place to have that go forward. In the meantime, Mark you can reach out to ES&S today on the terms that I and Joe has raised, see if we can come up with a modification prior to submitting that document down to the administration building, and to Council President Brady and County Executive Bush. That's not a problem to try to work through that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's passed unanimously. Thank you. I will move to approve the personnel agenda set forth on our docket here today in regards to the time off for Mr. Alto, and then this is the hiring of Angelique Simpson.
No, these are, the next two are also leaves of absence.
Leaves of absence, yes. Leave of absence for Ms. Simpson as well as Ms. Marissa. If there's a second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. It passes unanimously. And now an update on polling locations, Mr. Clyde.
Yes, polling locations. So, what our goal is, so we're currently not locked in with all of our polling locations. Our goal is to be locked in with all of our polling locations by August 31st, which I think is a realistic, obtainable goal of ours. So there has been some various steps in this process, and it started off as a big process, and we've kind of got some structure to it. So I wanted to just go through some of the steps that we've done, so you know where we are at. So the biggest part of this was actually we have diagrams of all our polling locations. The staff went through an election support, and they have redrawn all those poll place setup diagrams. And what they did, doing that in a manner where everything is to scale and taking into consideration social distancing, making sure that we have 6 feet around voting booths and check-in stations and all those things that we plan to implement, will implement in the fall. So they've done that part. And now that they've drawn these maps in a socially distant manner, we were able to see, okay, we may not be able to have all the same equipment in some of these locations. And so as an agency, we determined what's your greatest chance for bottleneck. Because we have kind of 3 main things. You have check-in on APBs, you have voting your ballot at a voting booth, and then you have scanning your ballot. We come to find that what takes the longest is voting your ballot at the voting booth. And so with that, we want to have as many voting booths as possible in the location. It's no good to check people in if they have nowhere to go vote, because you just can't continue to jam people in the poll place because then you lose your social distancing. So with that, we then take a look again and see, okay, how can we keep the most booths in there and try to not remove more than 30% of the voting booths from the location. So when they looked at that, they've gone through and they saw, okay, there are definitely some locations that we took out more than 30%. You know, that's not good. We need to address that. And so part of that is going out to the poll place in person and seeing, when you physically see it with your eyes, this look a little bit different than on paper. Can you get some more booths in there? So that's one option. Another option is if you pull away one EPB and one scanner, can you take that square footage and put some more booths in? And so through that process, we were able to get the vast majority of the locations, so there is less than a 30% reduction in the number of voting booths in the poll place. But so when that's not the case, though, then we start to look at, okay, do we need to pull precinct out? And if we pull a precinct out, is there an existing current location that we can put them into and still meet all the standards of social distancing? And if not, then you start looking for another location. Not that you have to wholesale move the entire location, but maybe you need to find a place to put this 1 or 2 precincts in. Or maybe it is a whole new location where you can move one location from point A to point B. And so those are some of the things that they have been doing election support over the months. As it stands today, we have about 12 locations. So we're talking, we're at, I think we have 296 polling locations. 12 of them, we have, there's a greater than 30% reduction in voting booths. We know that can't work. We're trying to focus in. These are our priority locations right now. 4 of them fall within the city of Cleveland, and then the other 8 are actually in the suburbs. So they're around the county. So that's what staff right now are putting an emphasis on that to get through those 12. And then hopefully what we have found in some instances is there might be another room in like a city hall where you can either they butt each other, so there's a partition wall that come down, or the rooms are right next to each other. You may have everyone check in one room, and then you vote in the room right next to it. We don't want to split up precincts, like some precincts go to one building or one room and some go to the other, because people don't know that. So if we can kind of take a different approach, this is the check-in room, this is the voting room, I think we can not have confusion and continue to keep some of those locations. In March, we were scheduled for 298 poll places. Like I said, we have about 296 right now. As we work through these 12 locations, I don't know. I don't think really the number will go down much. It may click up a few, which is fine. So we're going to be pretty close to where we were. We're not taking this approach of getting rid of all kinds of poll places and going to these 2%ers. just a handful around the county.
How many, are we notifying people, or people have going to new polling locations, and how many approximately are going to be notified?
So, don't know, but I do want to get on that point. So about 20 of the locations, that we're working with, they were not scheduled to be poll places in the month or in the March primary, but they are going to be in this November's. Now, some of those, I don't know what the numbers, but some of them were St. Patrick's Day conflict booths, where in November they voted at location A. In March, we were getting ready to put them at booth in location B. Now in November, they're going back to A. However, we need to notify them because we told them in March, hey, you're going somewhere else. So we need to notify them. And then the other ones, and the majority of them it's a new poll place for them to go to. And I don't know what the precincts are, because I was kind of waiting to get everything through this. But when we do, we are going to do multiple things to locate them at the poll place. We're not going to send the standard postcard that we had in the past. Do a letter. We did a letter for March. We think that voters are more likely to open it when they see that. So we're going to send them a letter, make them aware of the change. When we send out our voter information guide that we do for every election, for those who have a poll place change, that'll be indicated on there. That's a poll place change for them. We will work with the municipalities, educate them on what the changes are within their community, as well as working with the Cuyahoga County delegation of statewide officials. So state senators, state reps who appear on the Cuyahoga ballot, they are going to know whatever they want, whether they want just those municipalities within their district, or if they want the whole county. We're going to give it to them. We work together to get the word out. John Eddy will create a new interactive poll place change map for November that we've done for the last 2 times, and that's kind of nice. That's a nice tool on our website for people to utilize, as well as we'll go through our media events and social media and all those things. So, but the people, they will get 2 mailings. They'll get a letter, and then they'll get the standard countywide voter information guide. So that's
Another question, are the schools cooperating with the board?
Yes, the schools have been cooperating with us, and what has helped us out in some of these instances were some of these schools actually were an issue, and they have, some of them have 2 gyms. So what they've done is they've had us maybe in the older gym, now they're putting us in the new gym, the bigger gym. So what we're able to do is spread out, and even in some of these, like Garfield Heights, was going to be rough. We're going to be able to take a precinct out of an existing location, put it in the gym, because now they gave us the goal. And other schools have been good. City of Cleveland, which means that's the municipality that will use most schools. They've been very cooperative wherever we need.
There's no facility, like we had to scramble and get out of senior centers and apartments. We don't have any of those possibly sites that we're going to be told a month before we have to get out.
You know, so what we've done as part of our planning, we're not going in those locations, because the Secretary of State has told us to stay away from them. Even if they had it, you can't predict, and that was a horrible thing a week before the election. So we're not using any of those locations. Some of where we moved them for the spring, they get to stay there, but some of them we found a better location, because that was, we made all those decisions really in a handful of days. So we should have that. So it is, I think it's going to look pretty good when it's all said.
I mean, I know other board members may have questions for you, but, I think it's important to touch base on this at every meeting, on it briefly, and as well as how you're coming along with poll recruitment. But we don't have to talk about that this meeting, next meeting. I think Joe, Rob, Dave, do you have questions for Tony on the poll?
I just have one, just what, I know you're waiting to get all the final decisions about the polling locations, but when we notify voters, whatever we are sending in the manner of the 2 communications you mentioned, but if we can be sure to make sure that everything gets posted on the website as well. And then I know you're going to reach out to the local, the board leaders and the other folks that are in communication with their constituents to make sure they are aware of those changes as well. So that would just be my comment.
Thank you, Rob.
Any
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Just real quick, at next week, Henry is gonna go in depth a little bit more on poll workers, what's going on with that, but just so you know, as of today, right now, we're looking at a little bit over 2,600 new applications that we received since March's election.
Great.
So it's a combination of different things. So far, we definitely know we have 37 new attorneys who signed up and at least 92 county employees. The county just had started pushing out that information. But like I said, Henry next week will go into that a little bit more in depth. And then tomorrow is the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. So we're going to do a voter registration drive. We have a couple of those tomorrow. We'll get up for a couple hours as well. As what we did last week is we reached out to all the female mayors, county council women, state reps, and state senators who were females from our area and asked them to give us a little video that we would push out periodically throughout the social media on what it means to them. The passage of it. And then just we want to make you aware of a couple phone calls or meetings that we had. One of them we talked about earlier. We're meeting with or talking with the sheriff's office and the police about crowd control. I received a message from Secretary of State Chief of Staff Merle Madrid. He had asked me to attend a meeting with Merle and the Secretary with CABS tomorrow afternoon. Just want to speak some more about voter registration with them. By the way, Mortgage Field House is a poll place. It's one of our changes. Kind of exciting for November. And then also there's a call set up tomorrow with David Merriman, who's the administrator over Health and Human Services, who's going to try to work with us with some of the individuals who they have in their caseloads about potentially them working the polls as poll worker on election day and see how we can maybe help each other out. Us providing them a day's worth of work and then they providing a workforce. So
Perfect. Good stuff. Good stuff. Any other questions?
I'm sorry. Jeff, I just had one other thing I wanted to add. I wanted to thank Tony. We actually had the privilege of speaking to the Bar Association. Some of the members of the Bar Association as part of a presentation on preparing for the 2020 election, presidential election in the midst of the pandemic. And Tony acquitted himself very well, as you would expect, and they were very appreciative. But in terms of, and part of that was an effort to encourage the attorneys to become poll workers. I did want to just ask also when Henry provides an update at our next meeting, now that accountants and social workers are able to be poll workers, if we could find out what efforts we're making to reach out to those groups and they're getting professional educational credits for that. If we could let us know what efforts we are making to try to engage accountants and social workers to join our ranks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your participating.
Any other comments or additions from the board members? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any public comment, Anthony? Anybody on the line for that?
I have not heard from anybody concerning public comment.
Okay. Hearing none, then I will move to adjourn till we're coming back next Tuesday to certify the vote. There's a second? Second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you all for attending. We'll see you next Tuesday at 2. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Robin.
we're not doing too bad for only working 2 days a year. That's up.